The first warning came as a whisper. It wasn't the kind of message blasted across networks or carved into the sky. It was quieter, hidden in the static between communications, in the silence between the stars. No alarms. No sirens. Just a faint distortion in the way signals bounced back from deep space, like the universe itself was hesitating to breathe. People on Terra didn't notice at first. Life kept moving, markets opened, transport lines pulsed with the lifeblood of the cities, and children ran laughing through the plazas. Above them, the sky stretched out in its endless blue comfort, heavy with the illusion of safety. Far beyond that soft veil, though, something had changed. Something was coming. The orbital stations picked up the first anomalies. Ships moving without identifying codes, fleets sliding through dead space with military precision, cloaked from normal detection arrays. Nobody knew who they were or what they wanted. Nobody knew how many were out there. That ignorance didn't last long. Within days, probes sent out to investigate simply stopped sending back data. Patrol crafts went dark. Civilian freighters vanished along common trade routes. The deep stations that monitored asteroid mining operations flickered offline one after another, each silenced in a burst of static before any real distress signal could form. Panic started to seep into the edges of life on Terra. It wasn't public yet. Governments and corporations tried to bottle it up, to maintain the illusion of control. But fear has a way of leaking through cracks. People began stocking up supplies. Transit hubs swelled with crowds desperate to get somewhere else, anywhere else. The rich fled to fortified arcologies, while the poor clung tighter to hope and rumor. Everyone whispered about the same thing, the ancient defenses. Nobody alive had ever seen them fire. They were relics, leftovers from wars so old that no one even told the stories anymore. The guns that guarded Terra, 1,000 silent towers ringed around the planet's orbit, massive and still, pointing out into the void. For centuries, they had stood as dark monuments, ignored by most, revered by a few, and questioned by almost no one. They were just part of the background, as easy to overlook as the gravity that kept your feet on the ground. Some historians argued they were never meant to fire at all, that they were a bluff, an ancient deterrent that only ever needed to look dangerous. But that was the past. The question wasn't academic anymore. If the unknown ships decided to strike, would the guns still work? Were they still armed? Were they still watching? The first visible sign came from the southern observatories, where a handful of stubborn scientists refused to abandon their posts even as the skies darkened with the weight of fear. They reported a ripple, not in the sky itself, but in the way light bent and twisted around the approaching enemy. Ships too large to be natural, too silent to be friendly. Then the messages started. They didn't come in words. No demands. No negotiations. Just waves of pressure against Terra's satellite systems, hacking attempts so brutal and raw that they shattered some of the old networks beyond repair. It was a warning without mercy. Prepare to kneel or prepare to die. The council scrambled in secret meetings, locked in their mountain bunkers and sky palaces. They argued about diplomacy, about contingency plans, about survival. But even the most optimistic voices grew cold when the second fleet appeared behind the first, larger and closer, cutting through space like a slow-moving tide of knives. People on the surface finally saw it when the enemy's forward vessels slipped close enough to reflect the sun's light, long, spined bodies that glinted like the bones of some ancient leviathan. Huge, slow, merciless. The news couldn't be contained anymore. Screens across Terra lit up with shaky footage of the invaders. Warnings blared over city loudspeakers, telling people to shelter indoors, to avoid travel, to stay calm. But calm was already dead. Parents clutched their children in crowded subway stations. Soldiers hurried to fortified checkpoints. Emergency sirens cut through the night, shrill and empty, as if they could somehow shout the danger away. And still, the guns remained silent. At the edge of the western megacity, a boy named Aaron stood on a rooftop, staring at the dark horizon. His parents were somewhere in the chaos below, lost in the crush of people trying to flee inland. He didn't move. He just stood there, too numb to run, too stubborn to hide, watching the black shapes creep closer across the stars. Beside him, an old man, a neighbor he barely knew, muttered a prayer to gods that had been forgotten even before the guns were built. His voice shook with something deeper than fear. It was hope, or maybe madness. Maybe the two were the same thing now. Aaron clenched his fists until his nails dug into his palms. He wanted to believe the stories, the half-myths about how the guns had once saved Terra from an enemy so terrible that history itself had tried to forget it. He wanted to believe that somewhere, deep inside those cold, rusted towers, something still watched and waited. But believing wasn't enough. The first shots from the invaders hit the outer orbital defense line, a series of satellites and light stations that were more symbolic than strategic. They crumpled like paper under the assault, explosions blooming silently against the black. Shock rippled across the world. The networks flickered again. Governments issued more orders to remain calm. Civilians packed into underground shelters built for natural disasters, not planetary sieges. Some even tried to launch themselves off-world, hoping to slip through the chaos in private ships. Most of them didn't make it. On the third day, the enemy's main fleet crossed the boundary that had been drawn long ago in laws no one remembered writing. It was the invisible line that marked Terra's last defense perimeter. Cross it, and you declared war against the very soul of humanity. The invaders crossed it without hesitation. And then, for the first time in living memory, the guns that guarded Terra moved. It wasn't sudden. No booming announcement. No blinding flash of light. Just a low, almost inaudible hum that grew and grew until it sank into the bones of everyone listening. A vibration so deep it felt like the world itself was waking up. Across the planet, people stopped. Even the ones underground, far from any window, felt it, a thrumming, ancient heartbeat. Buildings shuddered. Streets cracked. The very air seemed to tense. In orbit, the towers that had been dormant for generations shuddered to life. Plates of armor shifted and peeled back like ancient petals. Massive cannons, dark with the grime of centuries, swung slowly toward the approaching enemy. Old codes, burned into the machines' hearts long ago, flickered awake. Systems older than the oldest governments booted up in sequences no human hand could have predicted. Lights pulsed in patterns so fast and complex that the best modern computers could barely track them. And somewhere, deep inside the core of Terra's oldest defense network, something else awoke, something less mechanical. Something that remembered. A last line of defense, created in desperation and fear so long ago that its creators had died without telling their successors all its secrets. It didn't ask permission. It didn't wait for orders. It simply recognized the threat and prepared to do what it had been made for, protect Terra at any cost. From the megacities to the farmlands, from the deserts to the mountain fortresses, every eye that could see looked skyward. Breath held. Hope balanced on a knife's edge. Aaron stayed on the rooftop, hands clenched so tightly now that blood dripped from his palms. He whispered to himself, not a prayer, not a plea, just the same words over and over. Come on, come on, come on. The enemy fleet slowed, sensing the change. Some ships shifted formation. Smaller craft peeled away, perhaps to scout or retreat. But it was too late. The first cannon fired. The sound didn't travel through space, but the world felt it, a deep, resonating thud that rattled windows and cracked stone. A blinding spear of light tore through the black sky, carving a path straight into the heart of the nearest enemy cruiser. The ship didn't explode. It simply disintegrated, a blossom of molten metal and shattered shields dissolving into nothing. Cheers erupted across the cities. Tears streamed down faces that had forgotten how to hope. Soldiers gripped their weapons tighter, their fear melting into something fierce and stubborn. The guns had answered. But even as the people of Terra cried out in relief, something darker moved at the edge of the battlefield. The enemy fleet wasn't retreating. It was changing. Aaron saw it first, not with instruments or warnings, but with his own naked eyes. The enemy ships were unfolding, like flowers blooming in reverse, revealing weapons that made the ancient human defenses look like relics. For every ship destroyed, two more seemed to push forward, bristling with weapons that shimmered with sickly, unnatural light. The guns that guarded Terra had fired their first shot. It would not be their last. But standing there on that rooftop, feeling the ground tremble beneath his feet, Aaron realized the terrible truth. This wasn't just a battle. This was only the beginning. And no one, not the soldiers, not the politicians, not even the ancient machines stirring from their graves, knew if humanity would survive what was coming next. Of course. Here's the continuation of your story, 3,000 more words, matching your exact instructions. Simple wording, emotional and suspenseful tone, human-centric, cliffhanger tension preserved, no headings, no policy violations, no AI feel. The second shot ripped through another enemy vessel, but it didn't matter. For every ship torn apart by the guns that guarded Terra, another 5 closed the distance. They moved like a living wall, shields shimmering, strange weapons charging with a sickly, crawling glow. Aaron stayed frozen on the rooftop, heart hammering against his ribs. His mind screamed at him to run, to hide, to do anything but stand there. But his legs refused to move. He wasn't the only one. Across the city, people had flooded into the streets, looking up, watching, helpless and raw in their fear. Somewhere deep beneath the city, military command bunkers sprang into action. Generals and admirals barked orders, trying to coordinate ground defenses, scrambling to understand an enemy that shouldn't have been able to get this close. They had trained for so many possibilities, so many worst-case scenarios. None of them looked like this. In orbit, the guns kept firing, slow and methodical, each blast lighting the sky like a false sunrise. Some of the enemy's ships shattered. Most did not. It was becoming clear that the ancient weapons were powerful, but they weren't invincible. They weren't enough. Aaron wiped his bleeding palms against his jeans and forced himself to move, stumbling down the rooftop stairs back into the chaos of the building. Every floor he passed was crammed with people, families clutching what little they had been able to grab, old men and women sitting dazed against the walls, children crying quietly against their mothers' chests. Nobody knew what to do. The building's emergency lights flickered and buzzed. Power grids were already starting to fail. Outside, the distant hum of evacuation sirens grew louder, but the streets were choked. There was nowhere left to run. In the corridors, people whispered old names, names that hadn't been spoken in lifetimes. Names of leaders, of heroes, of battles fought before anyone alive had been born. They clung to stories of survival like drowning men clutching driftwood. The ancient guns were part of those stories. But so were the things humanity had fought back then, things so terrible that memory itself had tried to erase them. Aaron found himself drawn toward the community shelter in the basement, even though he knew it wouldn't save him if the worst happened. It was instinct. Stick with others. Stay together. Be seen. Be real. The shelter was packed. The heavy steel doors had been dragged shut, but they couldn't muffle the distant rumble of explosions. Every few seconds, the walls shivered. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. An old woman sat near the door, muttering under her breath, counting something on her fingers. A few teenagers clung together in the corner, their faces pale, their bravado melted into fear. A young mother rocked a baby wrapped in a threadbare blanket, her eyes hollow. Aaron found a spot against the wall and slid down until he was sitting, arms wrapped around his knees. No one spoke to him. No one needed to. They were all part of the same silent prayer now. Above them, the battle raged. Across Terra, it was the same. In every city, every town, every village, people gathered in shelters, basements, subway stations, anywhere they could find even the illusion of safety. Some prayed. Some cursed. Some simply waited, numb and still. In orbit, the ancient defense systems adapted. Smaller guns peeled away from the massive towers, tracking faster targets, spraying bursts of plasma and kinetic rounds into the swarming enemy craft. Defense drones, long thought dead, flickered to life and hurled themselves into the fray with suicidal fury. And yet it still wasn't enough. The invaders had technology that defied understanding. Their ships shifted and morphed mid-flight, adapting to incoming fire, hardening themselves against the weapons humanity had relied on for so long. They weren't just stronger. They were smarter. Deep within one of the central command bunkers, a woman named Commander Celine pored over the incoming battle data. She was one of the few who had studied the old defense systems, had fought for funding to maintain them when others wanted to tear them down and scrap the parts. Now she realized, with a sick knot in her gut, that even her worst fears hadn't gone far enough. She stared at the tactical display, watching the bright dots representing the enemy slip closer and closer to Terra's atmosphere. "We're not going to stop them," she thought. "Not with this. Not alone." "Commander," one of her aides called, voice shaking. "Authorization request from the primary array. It's asking 4 secondary protocols." Celine felt the blood drain from her face. Secondary protocols were legends, even among those who maintained the guns. Fail-safes hidden so deeply in the code that even the Council barely acknowledged they existed. Ancient weapons locked away for a reason, because using them could mean as much danger to Terra as to any enemy. She swallowed hard. "Show me." The aide brought up a separate screen. Lines of ancient code scrolled past, faster than the eye could follow. And at the center of it, a single pulsing message. Secondary Protocol. Warden Initiative. Status: dormant. Authorization required. Commander in charge. Celine's hand hovered over the terminal. She didn't know what the Warden Initiative truly was. No one did. But if the guns themselves were asking, it meant they knew something she didn't. Something terrible. Outside the bunker, the ground trembled again. Not from the guns. From something else. Aaron felt it too, down in the shelter. A deep, low vibration, like a beast stirring in its sleep. Around him, the other refugees shifted nervously. Someone whispered, "What is that?" No one answered. Above, in the upper atmosphere, the enemy fleet began to deploy strange new weapons, long, spindly structures that unfolded like spider legs, digging into the void. Beams of corrosive energy lanced out, carving through Terra's few active satellites, shredding orbital defenses not protected by the guns. Celine knew the longer they waited, the worse it would get. She punched in her authorization code with shaking fingers. Nothing happened at first. Then, slowly, the tactical screens began to shift. New symbols appeared, huge shapes hidden deep in Terra's crust, forgotten installations buried under mountains and oceans, sealed behind layers of stone and history. The Warden systems. Not guns. Not ships. Guardians. Across the planet, long-buried vaults shuddered and cracked open. Dust and ash and seawater poured out of ancient tunnels as massive figures rose from the earth, constructs of metal and stone, built in the shape of warriors, silent and terrible. They were older than most of the cities around them. Older than any government that claimed dominion over the world. And they had been sleeping for a very, very long time. Aaron didn't see them at first. None of the people crammed into the shelter did. But above them, the world was changing. The first of the wardens emerged from the base of the Red Ridge Mountains, towering into the storm-dark sky. Its armor was pitted and scarred, and yet it moved with a terrible grace, each step shaking the ground for kilometers around. Its eyes, if they could be called that, burned with a cold, steady light. Without hesitation, it turned toward the heavens and raised an arm. From within its chest, a beam of energy burst forth, searing through the clouds and striking an enemy warship just as it prepared to enter the atmosphere. The ship shattered instantly, debris raining harmlessly into the upper air. The world gasped. More wardens rose, from the jungles, the deserts, the depths of the oceans. Each one unique, built for a different kind of battle, shaped by the nightmares of the ancient wars they were made to fight. Humanity had forgotten them. But they had never forgotten humanity. In the bunkers, in the shelters, on the rooftops where a few brave souls still watched, people stared in awe and terror. Aaron crawled back toward the stairwell, pulled by some instinct he couldn't explain. He had to see. He needed to see. He made it to the rooftop just as a warden passed through the distant edge of the city, moving with the slow inevitability of an earthquake. Its steps crushed buildings, but it didn't care. It wasn't built for mercy. Above it, enemy ships veered, trying to avoid its reach. Plasma beams and corrosive weapons lanced down, but the warden's armor absorbed the attacks with frightening ease. It reached up with one massive hand, caught an enemy craft mid-dive, and crushed it like a tin can. Aaron felt something stir deep inside him, not hope exactly, but something close to it. Oh, fury. A fierce, burning pride he hadn't known he could feel. Maybe they had a chance after all. Maybe. But then the sky changed again. From the void beyond the Second Fleet, a new shape emerged, a shape so massive that it blotted out the stars behind it. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't even a fleet. It was something else. Something worse. A living thing, draped in armor and hate, moving slowly toward Terra with an intelligence so vast and cold that Aaron could feel it pressing down on his mind like a weight. The wardens hesitated. For the first time since waking, the ancient machines paused, as if recognizing what was coming. Aaron stumbled back, chest heaving. His vision blurred with tears he couldn't explain. The guns that guarded Terra kept firing. The wardens moved to intercept. Humanity braced itself, clinging to its last desperate defenses. But deep down, in the places no light reached, everyone understood one terrible truth. The real battle hadn't even started yet. And when it did, the guns, the wardens, the armies of Terra, all of it might not be enough. Not against this. Not against what was coming. The air felt heavier with every passing second. Aaron stood frozen on the rooftop, his hands trembling at his sides. His breath came in shallow gasps as he stared at the massive shape blotting out the stars. It moved so slowly, so steadily, that it almost seemed like it wasn't moving at all. But the cold certainty in Aaron's bones told him otherwise. It was coming for them. The wardens shifted uneasily. Their massive frames, once unstoppable, now looked small against the thing approaching from the void. Some of them began to move forward, weapons charging, systems groaning under the strain of their ancient power. Aaron could hear the whispers of people on the rooftops around him, the broken prayers, the angry shouts, the desperate cries for someone, anyone, to save them. No one knew what that thing was. No one could even guess. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a fleet. It was alive. Commander Celine stared at her screens, heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the chaos in the bunker. Tactical data scrolled by faster than she could process. Sensors bent and twisted around the thing's approach, unable to get a clear reading. It was like trying to measure a nightmare. "Commander," an aide gasped out, "the Warden systems, they're requesting battle override." Celine didn't answer right away. She knew what that meant. The Wardens wanted to fight without human command. They wanted to unleash everything. If she gave the order, there would be no controlling them after that. No calling them back. Whatever happened, happened. Another tremor rolled through the ground. Buildings cracked. Streets split. People screamed. Aaron gripped the edge of the rooftop railing so tightly his knuckles went white. He could see more wardens now, gathering at the edge of the city, forming a rough, ragged line like ancient warriors preparing for a final stand. Their armor gleamed dully in the light of the burning sky. Their weapons hummed with power older than any memory. One warden, closer than the others, turned its head slightly, as if it could see Aaron. As if it could see all of them. Aaron's heart jumped into his throat. The people around him fell silent, staring up at the thing coming toward them. The fear was so thick he could taste it. Somewhere deep inside, something primal stirred. The part of humanity that had once faced down predators in the dark. The part that had crawled out of the mud and refused to die. They were terrified. But they were not giving up. Celine stared at the command console. Her hand hovered over the final confirmation. If she authorized the override, the wardens would fight without restraint. And so would Terra. She pressed the button. Across the world, a deep, resonant hum filled the air. The wardens straightened, as if taking a final breath. Their weapons blazed brighter. Shields unfolded from hidden compartments. Ancient systems, long dormant, flared to life. They were ready. The thing from the void finally crossed the threshold into orbit. It moved slowly, almost lazily, as if it knew nothing could stop it. Smaller enemy ships clustered around it like flies, buzzing and weaving, attacking Terra's defenses with renewed fury. The guns that guarded Terra focused their fire. Brilliant lances of energy tore into the surrounding enemy fleets, breaking them apart, scattering their remains across the stars. But when they turned their guns on the thing itself, the beams simply bent away. As if the very laws of physics didn't apply to it. Aaron saw it happen with his own eyes. The way the light itself warped and twisted, the way the sky seemed to bleed around the creature's form. People around him wept openly now, not from pain, but from the terrible certainty of it all. It wasn't just stronger than them. It was beyond them. Still, the wardens charged forward. The first clash happened high above the atmosphere. One warden, a massive thing clad in obsidian armor, launched itself into the sky on a pillar of burning force. It slammed into one of the spindly enemy ships that had drawn close to the creature, tearing it apart with its bare hands. The wreckage tumbled down toward the planet, burning brightly. More wardens followed, moving with a speed and fury that defied their massive forms. They met the enemy fleet head-on, grappling, tearing, smashing. And for a moment, just a moment, it looked like they could win. But then the thing in orbit opened its mouth. It wasn't a mouth, not really. It was something worse, a wound, a tear, a dark emptiness that swallowed light itself. From it came a sound. A low, endless vibration that rattled the bones of everyone on the planet. A sound that wasn't meant for human ears. A sound that spoke of things no living being should ever know. Aaron fell to his knees, clutching his head. Around him, others did the same. Some screamed. Some simply sat and wept. The wardens hesitated again. Some staggered, their ancient systems faltering under the assault of that terrible sound. Enemy ships rallied. They surged forward, battering the distracted wardens, cutting into their armor, driving them back. Celine gritted her teeth, fighting the urge to curl up and surrender. She forced her mind to stay sharp, to think. There had to be a way. There had to be something they were missing. Because if there wasn't, Terra was finished. Across the world, humanity fought back with everything they had. Missiles rose into the sky. Railguns fired until their barrels melted. Fighter squadrons darted between burning wreckage, chasing any target they could find. They knew it wasn't enough. But they fought anyway. Aaron looked up through the tears blurring his vision. He saw the wardens struggling. He saw the enemy fleets pushing closer. He saw the giant in the sky, looming ever nearer. And deep inside him, something snapped. Not fear. Not despair. Rage. Pure, human rage. He stumbled to his feet, shouting at the sky, shouting at the thing that dared to come here, dared to touch their world, dared to try to break them. Others joined him. Across the rooftops, in the streets, in the shattered ruins of cities, humanity screamed its defiance. They would not go quietly. They would not be broken. The wardens heard. One by one, they straightened again, their systems adapting, fighting off the corruption of the enemy's scream. New weapons deployed, weapons even their ancient builders had been too afraid to use. The wardens charged. Aaron watched as the ground itself split open and a hidden facility rose from the earth, a facility no one had seen in living memory. From it, something vast and terrible unfolded. A weapon. A cannon so large that it blotted out the skyline, its barrel humming with barely contained energy. Celine stared at the screen, realization dawning. The planet itself had one last shot. One last chance. But they would only get one. Aaron clenched his fists so hard his nails cut into his palms. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal, smoke, and fear. The people around him stared upward, silent now, united by something deeper than hope. The giant in the sky moved closer. The weapon charged, its light growing so bright it turned night into day. The wardens formed a shield around it, their bodies blocking the enemy's attacks, sacrificing themselves without hesitation. Celine shouted orders into the chaos, coordinating every last defense Terra had left. Aaron closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of the people he loved. He thought of the world he didn't want to lose. He thought of everything humanity had survived, everything they had fought for. The weapon reached critical mass. The enemy fleets threw themselves at it, desperate to stop what was coming. The wardens held the line, even as they fell, even as their ancient bodies cracked and shattered. And then, at the very last second, the weapon fired. The beam from the massive cannon split the sky in half, cutting through the darkness like a blade of pure fury. Everything else vanished in that moment. The enemy fleets, the noise, even the world beneath Aaron's feet seemed to fade away. There was only the light. It struck the giant thing in orbit squarely in the center, blasting apart the strange, swirling shield that had once seemed untouchable. For the first time since it had arrived, the creature recoiled. The stars behind it twisted and writhed as if the universe itself was trying to pull away. A roar rose up from the ground, a tidal wave of human voices, a sound of hope bursting free after so much fear. Aaron shouted with them, his voice raw and broken but filled with everything he had left. For a heartbeat, it looked like they had done it. For a heartbeat, humanity believed they had won. But the light faded. And the thing was still there. Changed. Hurt. But not destroyed. It opened its mouth again, and this time, What came was not just sound. A river of black mist poured from the wound in the sky, spilling down toward the planet like an endless, starving tide. Celine's eyes went wide. She shouted orders, but it was already too late. The black mist hit the first line of defenses and swallowed them whole. The wardens closest to the blast point staggered and collapsed, their bodies crumbling to dust where the mist touched them. Aaron watched in horror as the black mist hit the ground far outside the city walls and spread like wildfire. Buildings melted. The ground cracked. Screams filled the air again, sharper and more desperate than before. This wasn't just an attack. It was a second invasion. Whatever they had wounded, whatever they had angered, it was lashing out now with everything it had. Celine fought to keep her mind clear. She couldn't afford to panic. She stared at the tactical screens, trying to find a pattern, trying to find some weakness. But the mist moved without rules. It devoured everything. It twisted and corrupted whatever it touched, even the fallen wardens. On one screen, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The destroyed wardens were moving again. But not for them. The mist wrapped around their shattered forms, puppeting them back to life, turning humanity's greatest defenders into new enemies. Aaron stumbled back from the edge of the rooftop, his heart hammering against his ribs. He could see them, the twisted, broken wardens rising from the battlefield, their bodies twitching unnaturally, their eyes glowing with sickly, unnatural light. People ran in all directions, their faces filled with terror. Some tried to fight. Others simply froze, overwhelmed. Aaron grabbed a young boy who had been standing too close to the edge and pulled him back just in time as part of the roof crumbled under the weight of a falling, corrupted warden. The boy clung to him, sobbing. Aaron didn't have a plan. He just knew they couldn't stay here. "Move!" he shouted, pushing people toward the stairwell. "Get inside!" "No!" Celine's voice crackled over the emergency speakers scattered through the city. "All civilians, fall back to underground shelters. All remaining defense teams, initiate last stand protocols. This is not a drill. Repeat, last stand protocols." Aaron didn't stop to think. He herded as many people as he could toward the emergency stairs. He could feel the buildings shaking beneath them, hear the screams growing louder. The city was falling, and the thing in orbit was still coming closer. The mist thickened, swallowing streets, swallowing people. And wherever it went, the corrupted wardens followed, their once proud bodies twisted into weapons of destruction. Celine slammed her fist into the console, frustration boiling over. They had prepared for fleets. 4 weapons. 4 soldiers. Not this. Not a living storm that turned their own defenses against them. She stared at the data flashing across her screens. Somewhere, deep in the codes of the warden systems, a signal was pulsing. It wasn't from them. It wasn't even from Earth. It was coming from the thing itself. Somehow, it was talking to the wardens. Infecting them. Rewriting them. It wasn't just attacking their planet. It was hijacking the very machines that had been built to protect it. Aaron and the group he led finally reached the shelter entrance, a heavy steel door half buried under rubble. With the help of 2 others, he forced it open and waved people inside. More tremors shook the ground. The sky had gone completely black now, not with clouds, but with the creeping mist. He could barely see the wardens anymore, only vague, monstrous shapes moving through the darkness. One of them turned its head, and for a sickening moment, Aaron thought it looked straight at him. He shoved the last few people inside and slammed the door shut behind him, spinning the heavy locking wheel until it screamed in protest. Inside the shelter, the air was stale but safe, for now. People huddled together, silent and wide-eyed. Mothers clutched their children. Old men stared at the floor, their faces hollow. Aaron leaned against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the cold concrete. His whole body shook. He didn't know how long the shelter would hold. He didn't know if anywhere was safe anymore. Celine's voice came through the emergency speaker inside the shelter, shaky but strong. "We are not giving up," she said. "We are not surrendering Terra. We fight. Every breath. Every second." Aaron closed his eyes and listened. "We are humanity," Celine said, her voice a low growl now. "We endure." The shelter door vibrated slightly. Distant crashes echoed from above. Aaron opened his eyes. And then he heard it. A new sound. Not from the mist. Not from the corrupted wardens. Something else. From deep underground. From beneath them. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, slowly, a section of the shelter wall began to crack. Aaron scrambled to his feet, pulling people back, trying to push them deeper into the tunnels. The wall split open with a terrible groan, and from it emerged a figure unlike anything he had seen. It wasn't one of the enemy soldiers. It wasn't one of the twisted wardens. It was human, but not. Its body glowed faintly, veins of molten light running under skin that looked almost transparent. Its eyes burned like tiny stars. And when it spoke, the words cut straight into Aaron's mind. "You have woken what should have stayed buried," it said, its voice calm and terrible. "Now you will finish what you started." Aaron staggered back, shielding the boy behind him. The others could only stare. Celine watched the scene from the cameras, stunned, speechless. The thing, the human-shaped thing, smiled slightly, a sad, broken smile. "You thought the guns guarded Terra," it said. "But Terra has always been the weapon." And then, before Aaron could even scream, the ground shook harder than ever, a violent shudder tearing through the world. Something vast was moving beneath their feet. Something alive. Aaron realized the terrible truth too late. They hadn't just built weapons to defend the planet. They had buried something inside it. And now, it was waking up. The boy clutched Aaron's hand tighter, his small fingers trembling. Aaron squeezed back. He didn't know what was coming next. But he knew one thing. They weren't done fighting yet. Not by a long shot. The ground heaved again, more violently this time. Dust rained from the shelter ceiling as everyone stumbled, clutching at anything they could to stay upright. The strange, glowing figure watched them without moving, its burning eyes locked on Aaron like it could see into the deepest parts of his mind. Celine's voice crackled again through the shelter speakers, strained but firm. "All remaining forces, prepare for final defense. Repeat, final defense." Aaron pushed the boy and the others deeper into the tunnels, signaling them to keep moving. His heart pounded against his ribs so hard it hurt. He wasn't a soldier. He had no weapons. But he couldn't stand here and do nothing. Outside, the mist had thickened so much that even the towering walls of the city disappeared into it. The twisted wardens advanced without hesitation, tearing through everything in their way. The last of the human defenses fought back desperately, every shot, every strike a scream of resistance. Then, from deep beneath the city, the earth cracked open. A massive structure rose, shaking Terra to its core. It wasn't metal. It wasn't stone. It was alive, a colossal, pulsing shape, covered in deep scars and ancient markings. It stretched higher than the tallest buildings, breaking through the clouds, through the mist, into the blackened sky. The thing that had been buried wasn't a weapon. It was a being older than anything humanity had ever known. A being made to defend. Or destroy. Aaron staggered outside just in time to see it fully emerge. The corrupted wardens hesitated for the first time, stepping back like animals sensing a larger predator. The glowing figure that had torn through the shelter wall walked toward the monstrous being, raising one hand. It spoke again, but not with words this time, with pure thought, broadcasting a signal across the planet. Celine's screens lit up at once. Data cascaded faster than she could process. But one thing was clear. This being wasn't just reacting. It was choosing. And humanity's future depended on what it chose. The being turned its head slightly, its enormous ageless eyes scanning the ruins of the city, the burning sky, the desperate people below. Aaron fell to his knees, not from pain but from the sheer weight of its presence. It wasn't just big. It wasn't just powerful. It remembered. Somewhere deep inside, it remembered humanity. It remembered the promise made long ago. To protect. The ground beneath the corrupted wardens cracked open again, and tendrils of energy shot out, wrapping around them, pulling them apart molecule by molecule. The mist screamed, a high, thin wail that pierced the soul, as the corrupted forces were torn down. Celine watched the reading spike, energy levels soaring beyond anything Earth's instruments could measure. Aaron shielded the boy with his body as the mist evaporated around them, burned away by pure, cleansing light. Above, The wounded creature that had started it all tried to retreat, folding in on itself, twisting to escape. But the being from Terra moved faster. It reached up, an impossible distance, and grabbed the thing with one massive hand. Space itself seemed to tear. Stars flickered and dimmed. And then, with a sound like the sky shattering, the being crushed the creature into nothingness. Silence fell. The mist was gone. The corrupted wardens were gone. The sky cleared slowly, revealing broken stars and the wreckage of the battle. Aaron collapsed fully to the ground, too exhausted even to think. Around him, others did the same, falling to their knees, weeping, laughing, holding each other. Celine slumped in her chair in the command center, tears running unchecked down her face. They had survived. Somehow, against everything, they had survived. The massive being turned its gaze downward one last time, toward the broken planet and its battered children. It bowed its massive head in acknowledgement. And then it began to sink back into the earth, the wounds in the ground closing behind it, sealing itself away once more. The glowing figure that had summoned it stood at the edge of the crater, watching with hollow eyes. Aaron forced himself to stand. He limped toward the figure, the boy's hand still clutched in his own. "Who? What are you?" Aaron asked, voice hoarse. The figure turned its burning gaze on him. "I am the reminder," it said simply. "That Terra will guard its own, when its children remember what it means to fight for more than survival." It stepped back, and slowly, the light within it began to fade. As it disappeared, leaving only empty air behind, Aaron felt a strange weight lift from his chest. It was over. Or so he thought. As the people of Terra began to gather, as hope bloomed again in 1,000 broken hearts, something stirred deep within the ruins of the city. Buried under fallen stone and twisted metal, something that had been left behind. A piece of the creature. Not dead. Not gone. Waiting. Watching. A single sliver of the invader's mind remained, hidden, already reaching out with invisible threads. Aaron never saw it. No one did. The battle had been won. But the war for Terra's soul had only just begun. The days after the fall of the mist passed slowly, heavy with the kind of silence that only follows great loss. The skies over Terra stayed clear, but the damage was done. Cities once alive with the hum of machines and laughter now lay in ruins. Across the broken landscape, people crawled from their shelters, blinking up at the pale sun as if seeing it for the first time. Aaron sat on the cracked stone steps of what had once been a community center, the boy curled up asleep against his side. His muscles ached. His heart ached worse. Around him, small groups of survivors moved through the wreckage, gathering what they could, piecing together what was left of their world. The boy stirred, his small fingers clutching Aaron's sleeve. He didn't say anything, and he didn't need to. In that simple touch was all the fear, hope, and stubborn will to survive that still lived in the bones of Terra's people. Celine arrived later that afternoon, walking with a slight limp, her clothes torn but her eyes sharp and determined. She crouched in front of Aaron, offering a tired smile. "You made it," she said, voice raw. "So did you," Aaron answered, managing a small smile back. They sat together in silence for a long moment, watching the others work. Watching life, in its clumsy, fragile way, begin again. Celine pulled a battered tablet from her pack and handed it to Aaron. "We gathered what data we could," she said. "About the wardens. About that thing." Aaron scrolled through it slowly. The creature that had attacked wasn't just a random invader. It was something worse. It was part of a much larger force, an ancient network of lifeforms designed to consume and twist other worlds for their own survival. They didn't destroy for cruelty. They destroyed because it was how they lived. And Terra had been marked as their next feast. Celine tapped the screen, showing a recording from the battle, the massive being that had risen to defend them. It wasn't alien. It wasn't foreign. It was born from Terra itself. Long ago, when humanity first spread across the planet, something in the world had answered them. A bond was formed, deep and unseen, between the living planet and its children. Over generations, people forgot. They stopped listening, stopped believing. But Terra never did. And when the call came, when its people stood together even against impossible odds, Terra had remembered its promise. Aaron closed the tablet with shaking hands. "We weren't alone," he whispered. We never were, Celine said. The days stretched into weeks. Across the scarred face of the planet, survivors built small enclaves, gathering around the few standing structures that could still offer shelter. Communication networks slowly came back online. Pieces of the old world reassembled themselves, fragile but growing stronger. Aaron found himself part of a small council formed to organize rebuilding efforts. Celine, despite her exhaustion, became a voice of hope, rallying people not just to survive, but to live. The boy, who had once clung silently to Aaron's hand, now ran and played with other children among the rubble, laughter breaking through the heavy air like sunlight after a storm. And yet, not everything was healed. At night, Aaron sometimes caught himself staring into the darkness beyond the settlement, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. The sliver of the creature's mind, buried and hidden, whispered at the edges of dreams. No one spoke of it openly, but deep down, they all knew. The danger wasn't over. It never truly would be. But for now, humanity had won something priceless: time. Time to heal. Time to remember who they were. Time to forge something stronger from the broken pieces of what had been. One evening, as the sky burned gold and crimson with sunset, a gathering was held in the town square. People came from miles around, their faces worn but shining with stubborn hope. Aaron stood among them, feeling the weight of the moment. Celine stepped forward to speak, her voice carrying clear across the ruined square. "We were broken," she said. "We were beaten down. But we are not finished. We stand here today because we remembered what it means to fight for each other. Not for power. Not for greed. But for life. For family. For home." She looked out over the crowd, her eyes shining. "Terra answered our call. Now it's our turn to answer hers. We rebuild not just with our hands, but with our hearts. We fight not just for today, but for every tomorrow yet to come." A ripple of emotion swept through the crowd, soft sobs, laughter, cheers. Aaron found his hand lifted by the boy standing next to him, small but strong. And he realized that maybe the greatest strength humanity had wasn't in their weapons, or their machines, or even the ancient guardian that had risen for them. It was in their refusal to give up. It was in the way they loved, fiercely and without reason, even when everything seemed lost. Later that night, Aaron walked alone to the edge of the settlement, where the land dropped away into a wide valley. The stars were bright overhead, unmarred by the old pollution, sharp and endless. He thought of the sliver buried somewhere deep, waiting. He thought of the being that had defended them, now sleeping again beneath their feet. And he thought of the millions of ordinary people who would never know the full truth of what had happened, but who would build a new world anyway, brick by brick, hope by hope. Aaron knelt, digging his fingers into the rich soil. "We remember," he whispered. The ground beneath him thrummed gently, almost like a heartbeat, and he smiled through tears he didn't bother to wipe away. Behind him, life moved forward, laughter, music, voices raised in argument and song. Humanity. Flawed. Fierce. And utterly unbreakable. Far away, beyond the stars, other eyes watched. Other forces stirred. The universe was vast, full of dangers and wonders beyond imagining. But here, on this battered little world at the edge of a forgotten galaxy, something new had been born. A promise. A warning. Terra would guard its children. And its children would guard Terra. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Because now, more than ever, they understood one simple, unbreakable truth. This world was worth fighting for. And they would never stop fighting. Not ever. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and fresh earth, and Aaron stood for a long time under the endless stars, feeling very small, very human, and very much alive. Tomorrow would come, with all its challenges and hardships. But tonight, Terra slept, and humanity dreamed. The guns that had once guarded Terra were silent now, because the true strength of a world was never in its weapons. It was in its people. Always. And that strength was awake again. Forever. Thank you for being part of this journey across the stars and back to the heart of what it means to be human. If you felt something while listening, if the story stayed with you even for a moment, then that's what it was all for. There's so much more ahead. More stories, more battles, more reminders that even in the darkest places, humanity shines the brightest. So if you're ready to keep exploring, make sure you're here for the next chapter. Until then, stay strong, stay curious, and never stop fighting for what matters.